This meeting is being recorded.
Very good.
Just started, Court.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. April 14, 2022, we are convening the design subcommittee of the Concord Middle School Building Committee. Good morning. Because we're doing a Zoom meeting, we will be doing our roll call of members, voting and non-voting, as the case may be. I'll read off our list. Court Booth, I am present. Peter Fischelis.
Present.
And Don Gariello.
Present.
And Russ Hughes.
Present.
Lori Hunter.
Present.
Chris Popov.
Present.
And Charlie Parker.
Present.
Very good. Thank you so much. We will forego the minutes of March 17 and pick them up next time we convene, so we all have time to review those properly. Today is going to focus on, oh, did I hear somebody? Sorry. Okay. Today we will focus on continued review of the DD that's now so actively underway. And we're going to be looking at site and floor plan refinements, some interior design features, and the team will be seeking some feedback from us, some comments from us, but probably not specific declarations or recommendations. We don't make decisions at this level, but instead send recommendations on to the larger committee. So this was referenced as effectively a dry run or a rehearsal for what will be coming to the full committee. And initially the full committee was to meet a week from today. I'm guessing because some people are off on holiday next week, that meeting has or will be rescheduled. But so I'm guessing that might be conceivably March 5 or pushing it out an additional week, but that's a guess on my part.
Yeah, I hope that's the plan.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
mean, it needs to be the plan.
So yeah, we politely will indicate that some of us must boycott that meeting. Ask for a reschedule for April 28th. School personnel are going to be away.
That is the date of the next building committee meeting, April 28th.
Perfect.
Well, exactly. And we're saying that's not going to work out. And we're asking for a reschedule on that.
No, she said it is the 28th, so it looks like we're all set.
Oh, forgive me. Yes, forgive me. So 28th instead of 21st. Very
We
good.
must have
Thank
caught
you.
that earlier and fixed
Lovely.
it.
Okay, good. We're all
That's
set.
good.
Thank you, Lorraine. Okay. So with that, let's just take a brief moment and speak to the agenda before we turn this over to our design team. Members among us, comments on the agenda before we, Charlie Parker, please.
Yes, thanks, Court. This isn't specifically on the agenda, but the comment has to do with a mail that was sent on March 10th by Matt Root, having to do with a series of 8 or 9 issues that are sustainability oriented, among them, validating that we're on track to hit our EUI and making any adjustments necessary to ensure that happens and so forth. The list is fairly high level, but it has sufficient detail to be able to fold it into some sort of schedule. And what we, I guess, would like to see is a schedule for the sustainability subcommittee meetings going forward, and for that schedule to actually include those 8 or 9 items that we have, so that we can all be prepared to address those items, at the appropriate sustainability subcommittee meeting. I'm sure we're not going to solve this question this morning. I just wanted to raise it. Matt wanted me to raise it and get it on the table. And if you do have some sort of response at this point, that would be welcome.
All right, thank you. So we can expect perhaps to see that addressed 2 weeks from now. So you've got that on the record then. Thank you. Any other comments? Hearing none. Lorraine, who should we turn this over to? Good morning, Lorraine.
Good morning, good morning. I apologize for the mask. I'm going to Ireland tomorrow and I'm just trying to be careful. So,
Yes, yeah.
Bill, I believe you're going to share your screen, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you, Bill.
Excuse me, 1 moment.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. This is Keith, and thank you, Court, for that intro and overview. Essentially, we are keeping pace with our design development schedule and the work plan that we have released and continue to update to reflect our activities. You might recall that the last time we met with this group was on March 17th, and at that meeting, we showed you adjustments we made to the building footprint and the building enclosure in order to meet the value management targets, or I think you call them value management initiatives that we identified in schematic design. Since that time, we have been working closely with the educational leadership team. We conducted a series of design development programming meetings on March 22nd and 23rd. During those meetings, we met with the broader faculty and staff, reviewed each room, made sure we understood the functions to be performed in there, and also made sure that everybody had an understanding of the space that was allocated. We went back to that team on April 7th. We showed the finite plan adjustments that we made, and I want to be very careful to call them finite because we did not expand the footprint in any way. We did not change the window to wall ratio. It was all about kind of very fine grain refinement within the established footprint. At that meeting on April 7th, we also showed a couple of initial concepts that might guide the interior development. We got some feedback from that. And then we're being able to incorporate that conceptual approach to the interior development against the interior finish metrics that were established in schematic design. And by that, I mean that the cost model is built upon applying certain finishes to certain surfaces, and we're continuing to honor that and just build it. So today we want to show you the areas where we refine the floor plan. Bill is going to walk through that. I think we might take a slight pause in the agenda at that point, see if anybody has any questions. And then after that, we'll show you how we're beginning to advance the interior design of the facility. So with that, I'll hand it over to Bill.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, thank you, Bill.
And everyone's seeing the screen, right? Okay. So thanks for having us back, and let's dive in. So I think at this point we're all fairly familiar with the project, but in case anyone is not, so the building is essentially laid out in two wings. There's the wing.
We're looking at title slide right now.
Oh, interesting. Why aren't you advancing?
There you go.
Oh, so there must be a really slow.
Yeah, you can move fairly quickly on this part. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, so the two wings of the building, and then on the right, each grade is on a level, and each grade is comprised of 3 different teams. So that's the 3 teams you see here. On the left side of the image, we call the shared spaces, which includes the media center, the cafeteria, the auditorium, administration, music classrooms, and gymnasium. All arranged about this meandering path through the building that is the circulation. Moving up to the upper floor, you see that same diagram on the right with the 3 classrooms and then engineering classroom, as well as some offices in here. And then on the left, we have art and the 5 world language classrooms. Moving down to the lower level, we're going down the hill. We see that this is just the 3 teams, and this would be the Family Consumer Science classroom, and additionally some offices. So just for the sake of showing some, at this point, we are integrating all of the systems, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, structural systems, so that there are some very fine grained changes as we're integrating a structural frame and ductwork. So things are changing that are very subtle. So in addition to that, we have the programming comments from the educators. So let's dive into some specifics. This is the media center. We could briefly speak here, but we have yet to meet with the media center staff. There was a conflict when we were on site last month. So, but this doesn't integrate some comments from the administration, the school administration. We're generally providing a flexible space with most of the books on casters, most of the furniture on casters. So this can really become a very flexible space and morph to whatever the school needs it to be. If they need to have a small forum, they can arrange furniture as such. If there's a project happening, if there's a class that comes in here, the tables can be arranged to create a classroom environment. The key here is flexibility. You're also seeing on the north side against the corridor, we included this schematically in the previous phases of the project, some display cases that open onto the corridor, and we can show some images of that later. Here we see the music spaces developing. The music department is very engaged with this and excited about the opportunities with the auditorium and the relationship to the classroom. So we previously had some small practice rooms, and they wanted that to become more of an ensemble space. And this is continuing to develop as we integrate all of the storage requirements into this space. That will mostly be furniture solutions instead of a fixed kind of storage space.
Bill, can we interrupt briefly as you go so we don't have to come back to these?
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead.
Did you preserve any practice rooms, or did they all need to be absorbed into ensemble space?
I believe we actually got some follow-up communications from them. So the request now is to have some small practice rooms. But the idea was that this would be a medium-sized room that could serve a small instrument group rather than. I think it's more typical in high schools to have the individual practice rooms, and their concern was to give them the most flexibility. A solo could practice in this space, or it could be a 1 or 2 students, or 3 or 4 rather.
Okay, so it's not going to be a potential for the after-school music instruction that is so individualized.
It could serve that function. So this will continue to develop.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. This is the gym. I believe we've seen this before. There's been some minor changes, and as we integrate plumbing and maybe start looking at some cost of how we can reroute the plumbing in here, you might see some changes on the north side of this, just looking for efficiency with respect to cost, and then consolidating some of the storage areas. So we currently are showing 3 storage areas off of the gym, 2 all gender toilet rooms with showers in them. The lower one envisioned as a student only space that would also have lockers if a student felt they wanted to change in a private space and keep their things locked up in there instead of going to one of the gendered rooms. And then you see an office for the PE faculty, as well as the OTPT room.
Can you go back?
Sure.
From a supervisory perspective, Lori, do we want the office on the corridor or directly adjacent to the gymnasium? sometimes those sight lines are useful to teachers. I don't know, but
Yeah, I think we'll probably, there's always, two different ways to consider this, which sight line you want. So we'll loop back with the gym staff and just give it one more thought. But I think for now, we like it where it is.
okay, as long as they've signed off on it. Okay.
Yeah, they have.
Okay, thank you.
The administration guidance in nursing continues to evolve. We have yet to meet with the guidance staff again. There was that conflict when we were on site. But the idea is to create the individual suites for each, and that's been consistent through the design phases. So we have the protected access into the administration, and from there, the faculty envisions most guests, that is parents or someone coming in for a meeting, are going right into conference rooms adjacent to that, and actually trying to keep all visitors in that suite. The principal and other staff members are off of a corridor behind that, and then that's zoned to keep all the administration centered around that entry point. The nurse is accessed off of the corridor here, and we've created a suite there, given them a small conference room that came out of the square footage allocated for the waiting room, because it was a request just with COVID and privacy. They needed a separate space to be able to make calls or quarantine students as necessary. The guidance area will continue to develop as we get their feedback on how they envision that program within the school long term. We are integrating a mother's room, which was not in the program. So this is coming out of our gross square footage factor. It was a request that we heard and advocated for, to provide a small room for that function.
Bill, could you speak to vehicle access for the nurses suite? Should we evacuate a patient?
Yeah, so we're currently planning, they have access to this corridor and straight out to the north to the drop off. That's where we envision an emergency event if EMS needs to come in, and we've oversized doors to accommodate that. And then they also have direct access to the main lobby if there's someone that needs to come in and have maybe a meeting for a medical issue or something.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah. The team, we've really worked hard to keep this as planned and be as flexible as possible. There have been some, as we are, talking to our code consultant and analyzing code, we needed to flip these doors around so that we can provide egress from this space, and integrating casework and all of the technology and systems that we need in these spaces. But the concept of science, English, math, and social studies all remaining clustered about a commons is consistent with the 2 breakout rooms. The art continues to develop as we are integrating this stair and trying to rework the geometry to simplify up here. We're creating 2 art classrooms organized about a central storage room, and also giving them a dedicated kiln room for ceramics. And then trying to integrate some displays that are dedicated for that art, and hoping that this corridor can become a kind of learning throughout the building moment, where maybe they can take pinups or critiques in the art class out into the hallway and let that program spill out throughout the school. The loading dock and the receiving area is advancing as we're integrating systems, and speaking with the custodial staff and the administration, just looking at, what does a dock leveler look like? How are we bringing things in? Where's storage? How are we accessing spaces? So
For next week, you'll want to change your red outline over to southwest.
oh yeah, excuse me. I just-
Minor point, but that's
Yeah.
that's one of our purposes today is to see if we can.
Yeah, these were all added. I thought.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
But thank you. I missed that.
So Court, I'd just like to add, thank you very much, Bill, for that overview. That Bill mentioned a couple of additional meetings that were initially scheduled, and we rescheduled, and then we also added some. So in the next few days, actually today, we're conducting some meetings relative to fire, police, life safety, and security. And then the week of April 25th through 29th, we're going to have another coordination meeting relative to the auditorium, educational technology, and with the guidance suite. So these have, taken a significant iterative step forward. There's still another level of refinement, but we are, making significant progress toward refining the plans to reflect the input of the educational team and within the context of the fixed square footage for the project.
Thank
I
you.
guess we wanted to, I'm sorry, Court.
Yeah,
Go
can you
ahead.
remind us who do you consult with in terms of security specialists to bring in with our own public safety people and so on? Do you have a security consultant?
Yeah, we have,
I know you're working with Concord PD.
Yeah, we have a consultant on board, 3SI. They've been on since concept design and have been engaged in all the conversations with the police department and fire department today.
Good. Okay.
We're not showing it now, but it's probably just worth noting that as part of our meetings on the 22nd and 23rd of March, we did do a comprehensive review of all the kitchen equipment and the servery and the cafeteria. There was, some finite adjustment, but that was another exercise we did. So, we feel comfortable that we have the right equipment in the right place for the kitchen.
Okay. Lori, does Bryce get involved in this?
Yes,
is
he
he
met
on-
with them already. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And then the other thing I would like to say is that we did in those series of meetings in March, part of the discussion was identification of the teaching wall, in each of the rooms, and then also how a room could be structured for some of that more formal instruction and then more casual interaction or collaborative activities. So we've rehearsed those aspects of the classrooms, and as we meet, I think it's in 2 weeks, we'll have a deeper dive into whatever educational technology is integrated into the space and which of that will be flexible. So this is I used the word before, but it's an iterative advancement. And so, it reflects educator input, and it also reflects fine tuning the plan to accept the structural grid and the mechanical pathways. So that's an overview of the plan development. We'd like to move toward a conceptual development of the interior, the concept behind the interior development, and then some illustrations of vignettes so we can show you how the interior is developing, but we're happy to take any questions relative to the plan before we move to that point.
So I'm eager to open it up to our subcommittee and any other questions that we have. The more we can field test this now, the tighter it gets for the larger group. I don't think there's a great deal to be done. It's very clear, well done, but I still hope we can put a few questions toward it.
Yeah, I just say that we've had a great dialogue with Lori and her team. They're very responsive and engaged in the development. So it's been, I feel like we're making very solid progress here.
Keith and Lori, were there any particular questions or trade-offs that were especially difficult for a resolution between the design team and the educators?
No, I think we've been able to voice suggestions or hopes within the space that's available, and they've come back. The library is a great example of getting some feedback from us and reworking it a bit so that it will meet multiple needs.
Mhm.
No, it's been really a nice iterative process. I'm grateful that they often can come back with ideas that mean we didn't give up anything without great compromise.
Good, good. Pleased to hear it. Okay.
I
have a question.
Has a question, yeah. Mhm.
Hi,
I
Dawn.
do. Hi, related to the media center, do you know how many volumes of books there are or there intend to be? Sometimes there's downsizing that happens as you.
There
maybe-
definitely will be, Dawn. We're gonna
Yeah.
call the collection beforehand. I don't have a number. I don't know if any of the design.
It
team-
just looks, I assume the caster ones, Ewing Cole team in the middle are kind of low, either 36, 48s, I don't know. That you could see over them because they often, anything taller might get too heavy to even move, even if they're on casters, but just something worth noting. It looks like a fairly small collection, but I'm not sure what the current volume count is. And then the other question I have sometimes, and it looks like maybe there's enough, sometimes an entire class will come in and use the media center for presentations or something unique. And I don't know if that's happening here. Often I get requests to have the media center used as a media center, but also have the ability to have a 20 some odd student class in there for something different. So just a couple things to think about. I know you said you weren't able to meet with them, but an alternate layout that might accommodate that. Maybe
No, we had that
useful.
conversation, Dawn, for sure.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So we're working through it.
All right, great. But otherwise it looks great, guys.
Other comments, questions?
Cord, I have a question just for the SMMA, you and Cole team. It seems like you guys are making good progress here, but just wanted to get your pulse on, pace and schedule as you're building up towards the May 27th deliverable here.
Good question. Thank you.
We're on pace, we're on schedule, Ian. It's advancing well. I mean, I think, the days in person were great for programming that gains so much information in a very short space of time. And Justin and Laurie have been very accommodating with follow-up, so we're doing fine.
Good.
Okay. All right, so we're going to bring it back to Bill and Keith then.
Yeah, we're going to actually hand it over to Saul at this
Very
point.
good. Good morning, Saul.
Good morning. Thank you for having us again. And it's been really a pleasure working with the educators. And this is kind of the exciting moment where we're beginning to flesh out the schools. And we showed you some images earlier. And we're starting to develop the vocabulary for the entire school. And, the thought here would be to create a joyful place that, but it's also calming. And begin to kind of borrow from the thoughts and the sort of the culture of the town. But first, in the first image, we wanted to talk about the notion of choice. One of the elements that were very important to the conversation earlier on is to make sure that the students or the children have a choice, in the sense some of them would want to be sort of in the middle of a large crowd, would enjoy that. Some of them are more reclusive and might want to withdraw, or some of them might just not feel that day like being right in the middle of the sort of an event. So we're beginning to kind of sort of design a set of spaces that we would call Eddy spaces or screened areas. The idea here is to create places where people can sort of withdraw, but still have the complete visibility in and out of those spaces. And there's two strategies for that. One we would call Eddy spaces, and one would be, we would call screened spaces, right? So those are two things that we have to keep in the back of our mind. One of the issues that sort of students have in many schools is that all of the areas are very large open spaces, and then there's no places of shelter, right? So that's some of the concepts that we're trying to bring into the space planning of the design here. And in the next image, we're trying to borrow and begin to create sort of a vocabulary, and we discussed this with the educators, a vocabulary that it references Concord, and obviously Thoreau and his sort of interest not just in Walden Pond, but also in the Concord River. So we thought that the idea of a stream would be really interesting, and particularly given our configuration. And you can see here the yellow path that cuts through the building with these little eddy spaces that we were referring to. And what's interesting about the creek or the stream is the fact that it begins to create these kind of soft spaces. It's not necessarily linear. It is linear, but again, it has a bit of a kind of sculpted configuration that softens the space and makes it less institutional. And what's also interesting about this is sort of a design strategy that applies to sort of the cost of the building. That if you look at the creek, there's an intensity along the creek, but then the rest of the space begins to be this kind of simple matrix. And the same thing in our sort of concept design, in which the circulatory path or the public path begins to have a what we would call density, or more of a level of interest. And while the rest of the building begins to be very simple and very sort of, I'd say, standardized, even though most of our public spaces fundamentally use standard materials and we're operating within the matrix of the budget. So in the next image, what's interesting about that image, it's a detail of a creek, is that did the image turn? That within the creek or the stream, you have these, I would say, embeds, the rocks that create these softer, calmer, more peaceful areas, allowing the circulation to pass through the stream. And that begins to be one of the sort of fundamental structuring ideas of the spaces you'll be seeing soon. Now, of course, because we are at the edge of the forest and because we are in Concord, we wanted to begin to bring some of that idea, the notion of the forest or the green spaces, into the design of the building. And in the next image, what's interesting about the woods is not necessarily just the woods themselves, but it's I would say, the forest edge. And what's interesting about the forest edge is that, psychologically, it gives us sort of an edge to sort of have our back to, and then we can actually survey the field. So the edge of the forest begins to be kind of interesting. And one of the gestures in that is these sort of upward looking branches that begin to open up to the light. The next image refers again to the forest edge, but it has this screening ability that you can see through it, and you can see the light, and you can see openness maybe on either side, or you can see more forest, but the tree trunks begin to create that sort of subtle screen that modulates the two spaces. So we begin with the lobby area. We've looked at that image before. It's a simple room that has use to the outdoors on both sides, north and south. But what we begin, after also discussions with the art department and the school and the educators, began to introduce these partitions that are really meant for display. And what's nice about these partitions, if you can go to the next image, is that they begin to create those smaller spaces for seating without really compartmentalizing the space too much. They also, again, are part of the educational program of the school, and they create those kind of quieter spaces, even though they're pretty open still, quieter spaces along the edge. Next image, you can see sort of the effect and the ability to create these furnitures. They're almost, I would say, chapels in relationship to the larger nave of a church. Next image. And it's the orientation is perpendicular to the flow. And what's wonderful about them is also they allow for complete openness to the woods on the other side. Also, the shape of the bridge, if you can go back one more image, and you'll see that in a number of spaces. It's this kind of V shape that again opens up on the other direction, lifts up towards the sort of the wooded area. Next image. And we can go to the next one. And now we're beginning.
Sorry, can I interrupt for a second before we move on from those? Could you go back a few that give you kind of the perspective of the entire, there's something through there. Yeah. I like your concept of the stream and the organicness of it, but when I look at this, it's very orthogonal. Like maybe it's the flooring or the straight lines of the bridge that I like the concept of these little, smaller pods or places that students can gather and have, more intimate conversations or connections with their students. But I would maybe suggest that some of the either materiality or geometry become a little more organic, so it's less orthogonal and speaks to that concept about the stream.
Absolutely. I mean, this is actually one of the areas that we struggled introducing a lot of soft form into it. And I agree. And we started doing that with the wood soffit that you're seeing on the left side. And it happens on both directions, but maybe we can introduce some more in terms of the flooring. We're trying to reserve the soft form primarily to the ceilings because it's probably the most cost-effective way of doing it. But you'll see it introduced in a number of places gently because of cost issues, but we can certainly do it with flooring materials and some of the other conditions. Point well taken.
And is this linoleum flooring?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you could water jet, like,
absolutely.
The Concord River or the Assabet River flow through so that there's like a kind of a separate area of breakout and then a more like traditional, this is where you walk flow. So just something to think about.
That's a great idea. Yeah, it's a great idea.
Energize this in a way that's more organic. So
yep, that's a great idea.
Looks great.
Yeah, and we are trying to keep it sort of. I mean, I think that the tendency in a lot of schools is to throw in a lot of activity, visual activity, color, and things like that. We're trying to keep it relatively calm with just careful introduction of the natural. Well, it's really not real wood, but the wood look and some softer colors, allowing sort of whenever we have a larger room, allowing the incredible views we have to be the key sort of player, but absolutely introducing some other sort of sense of curvature or softer forms could help a lot here. So if we go to the next image, we're beginning to look at the media center. And what's interesting about the space is that it's completely visually open to the stream or to that path. We have two nano walls in sort of and between them, we have two display walls, but the display walls again are meant to be transparent with glass on both sides, so you can see it both ways. And again, you can see here the sort of very kind of gentle, softer curvature in the ceiling elements in both the corridor side and the media center side.
You did not have this image in your draft, so this is a new image.
Next, and again, I think that there's some color that can be also introduced additionally to this. Now we're turning right around, and what you're seeing here is the stair that you saw earlier to the upstairs, and it's really an egress stair. It's on a discretionary stair, but we're trying to turn that into an opportunity. And so what you're seeing here is a stair and then a couple of benches that begin to kind of create a place for children or the students to sit. And that sort of element of the stair begins to stitch this space to the cafeteria space you will see in a second.
So Saul, I don't mean to interrupt the presentation, but I do think that this is illustrative of Dawn's earlier question about capacity of volume. So you can see that we're putting the full height shelves on either side of the media center and then trying to keep everything in the middle low. So we have to calibrate that against the actual number of volumes, but that's our approach conceptually.
Yep, and we have an image inside as well in a minute. So we'll go to and so in here, you're beginning to see what I would call the screening element. And we're introducing these wood slats in a number of places. One of them is here in the stairs, so you'll have some visibility between the stair and the cafeteria. And you're also beginning to see the relationship between this series of slots and wood to the elements within the cafeteria itself. Next image. And now you've kind of turned, and this is, again, one of those eddy spaces that we're talking about. It's a transitional space between the corridor and the cafeteria where people can sit down and just have a conversation. And it's a little bit off, I would say, the main path. Again, the soffits are beginning to, and here you begin to see a more active use of the flooring material in terms of beginning to kind of shape the space. And in the next image, so within the cafeteria itself, we're trying to create a number of, I would say, seating arrangements. And one of them are these booths on the left side, as well as what we just referred to a minute earlier, this kind of amphitheater seating or bench seating on the left side. And in the next image, again, you're seeing the role of that screen on the right side is begin to divide some of the cafeteria space in order to kind of demass or scale it down a little bit and give it a little bit more of a sort of a human scale. On the left side, we're beginning to introduce some texture and material through a tile wall. But most importantly here, the sort of the hero moment here is the view into the woods that you're seeing in the sort of in the background. We're introducing plants, whether they're actual natural, artificial, in the center, just to begin to green it, where we have the banquette seating. And in the next image. Now we're at the wood's edge. And again, you're seeing that sort of uplift gesture opening up into the woods, which is similar to the condition at the lobby with the bridge. Now we're moving to the media center. And this is what Keith was referring to, where we have full height shelves on both sides. And then you have the lower shelves on casters. Again, we're trying to create subtly zones through the use of the ceiling elements. Next image. Now we're moving to the commons, the classroom commons area. Again, the lockers are sort of there for some of the grades, but we have the zone that's open to the corridor, but begins to create an enclosure for the seating or for the events that are unique to the group of classrooms. And again, we have just very few slats to begin to create a sense of space, and also here serve as shelves for the commons area. Next image. This is a view of the commons area from the classroom. And you're seeing the corridor. And again, a careful use of color as a background element, introduction of softer colors. And we will probably introduce other colors depending on for each class, for each level. But the intention is to use softer, not necessarily pastel-y, but softer, more muted colors that are referential to the environment, like probably a light green, a light blue, or other sort of colors. You're also seeing here the partitions, the glass partitions that open up, allowing the classrooms to be integrated into the commons area.
And then what you see on the right side of this image is a solid operable partition, and that could open up as well. And I suspect that we will show you that vignette of what happens when the two classrooms are combined and open to the commons area.
This is particularly the 6th grade level where we're introducing lockers. At the 7th and 8th, this would become a just a workbench up against here, dividing the corridor.
What's the thinking there, Bill?
The original thought was that it would all be workbenches, so provide choice of, a student can pull out and do individual work or group work along that counter. But we were asked to introduce lockers for 6th grade as a rite of passage.
I see. Okay.
That was introduced in SD court. So that was part of the SD conversations in the SD budget.
Thank you.
So this is where we're at now. Love to hear your feedback. The next step is to take some of the other spaces. As you can see here, we're beginning to create this vocabulary of elements that we would like to repeat consistently in some of the other spaces to some extent, in the sense that some of the other spaces will be muted down. The next, one of the big ones that we'll be studying next is the auditorium. So, open the floor for comments.
So comments, questions? I imagine you're cautious, Saul, because there might be such a thing as too muted. But I do appreciate your emphasis on the kinds of psychosocial needs that kids have and how design can support those needs. I thought you articulated it beautifully. Thank you very much.
Well, I think that there'll be more color added as, the furniture will have a color, other things, but right now we were trying to kind of work on the spaces themselves.
Mhm. Chris, please.
Thank you, Saul. No, it's good looking stuff. Have you been able to get input from maintenance and maintenance staff on some of the things you're suggesting?
We've shown it to the educators. We will be working with the maintenance staff to discuss some of this further. Most of the elements that we're seeing here are pretty, the linoleum, the flooring, the walls are solid proof. All the wood in the ceiling is accessible. So we're aware of the sort of events that would happen in a school. And we'll be working with them to make sure to give a sort of a more careful check on everything.
And we're working strategically so that where we need access, we're providing either a ceiling tile that lays in or an access panel. Trying to mostly use the ceiling tile for those high maintenance areas.
Just a quick follow-up was partly thinking of the various eddies and nooks and things like that are great to have, but they present more places that have to be cleaned and maintained and flowed through with, all the cleaning equipment on a daily basis, that kind of thing.
Sure. It's interesting, but what you're seeing here is a sort of a concentration of all the more important areas. And so the rest of the school is not, I would say, scattered with them. So I think we're trying to create those very specific spaces in the larger public areas. The rest of the school will be very simple, actually, just simple corridors with simple walls and simple rooms, maybe with some colors and accessible ceiling. So I think you're seeing a lot here, but that's sort of the core of the events. 90% of the school is much simpler.
Peter, good morning.
Good morning. Yes, Saul, it looks great. I had the same questions that Chris did, but the materials you're using in the ceilings look great. I like the fact that you've kind of used different materials and different heights to create spaces. That looks really nice. One minor point on the lockers. So we're providing lockers for 6th graders, but not 7th and 8th graders. I'm just wondering, a question on the rationale behind that. And then also lockers down at floor level don't seem to me to be very practical, like that bottom row where a kid would really have to get down on the ground to potentially use it. So just a small comment there.
I can-
Sure, Laura can.
No, I was just going to talk to the 7th and 8th grade. We've morphed away from lockers for the 7th and 8th graders through COVID, and it's proving to be a positive that the kids like having their things with them. So 6th grade was very different, and they definitely wanted the rite of passage to have a locker space. That said, we came in at a small-ish kind of locker space where they can keep a few things, not necessarily their whole worlds. So I don't know if they can answer the rest on the design approach to that.
We can look to address the issue of the lockers. Fortunately, they're a lot shorter than us most of the time, but we will look at that. I mean, I think that the issues of how much space we have, and we're trying to kind of limit the lockers to a certain area.
Yeah. Given that it was sort of a late in the SD effort ad, trying to incorporate that into the school was a bit of a struggle, but we think there's at least 80 students, so we need to provide a lot of lockers per team. So this felt like the simplest way to do that didn't get in the way of the educational needs.
Peter, it is a valid point, and we
Yeah.
can look at alternate strategies to accommodate the required number of lockers, and we'll take that as a action item and look to see if there's a better way to do that.
Maybe there's a return on the right
Yeah.
side, which can absorb some of the lower lockers.
Great, thank you.
Other questions, comments, concerns? Things we're curious about here? So
And I can flip back to other images. This was just a small selection if necessary.
no, this has been a very helpful step forward for us. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, hearing none, I think we are satisfied for the present, Bill.
All right, great. I'm going to turn over to Mike Dohan.
Morning, Mike.
I don't know if Mike, you want to share your screen, or I can continue sharing. Might be easier.
Let's hopefully, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, speak up a little bit, but we got you.
All right. Sorry, my connection's been a little spotty this morning. No, Bill, if you don't mind leaving this up, it's only two or three slides, so this will be fine. Good morning, everyone. So I just want to give a quick update on where we are with the site design and a couple specific elements. So if you stop right here for a minute, Bill, that's great. So about mid-March, about 3 weeks ago, we met with leadership. We met with Lori, Justin, Russ Hughes, and a few other people from Russ's staff for our planning program review meeting for the site. Just for time constraints and to just be able to tackle the most important elements of the design that we wanted to review with them, we kept the presentation and the discussion to these 5 areas. We discussed vehicular circulation, we discussed bus drop off and pickup. We talked about what's going on over at the loading dock area. We reiterated programming decisions at the athletic fields. We talked about the outdoor learning spaces. So today, though, I only want to talk about the first 2 elements because those are the areas where we had the most discussion. Those are the areas where we have made some tweaks to the design that we all think work for the better, that were a result of some really good feedback from Laurie and Justin and Russ. The loading dock area is just like where just like what Bill was presented a few minutes ago. Those areas are still evolving a little bit, but we've got that area pretty much settled. The athletic fields, the baseball fields, softball field, soccer field, they're sort of set in their location. There's still some program questions to go on over there to figure out a few other things, but they're pretty much set too. And the outdoor learning areas are still a work in progress. I think we've identified needs for them. We've identified locations for them. We've identified sizes for each of them. And now we're just kind of tweaking along the design and the physical manifestation of those things and how they're going to be programmed, and working that in concert with you and Cole. We keep meeting we're having regular meetings about those areas to make sure that we get those just right. But jumping back into the vehicular and bus circulation, Bill, if you could go to the next slide, please. The last time we met and at SD, the sort of bus and car circulation sort of lived like this, where we had a series where we had 18 buses. We had a series of, say, 14 of the buses were stacked towards the front entrance of the building, diagonally, similar to the way it's done today. And we had them set like that, and then there was very specific queue length and queuing time. And then the other four, of course, because we couldn't fit them at the front entrance, were over towards the west of the building, a little further away. We had them split like that, and we felt like the circulation worked well for the buses in terms of how they, especially in the morning, right? The morning's always easier. We've discussed this many times. The morning's easier because it's a rolling drop off. Afternoon is a little different because it's a static pickup, right? Where everything and everyone is there, every vehicle is there at the same time. So we need to make sure we accommodate that. And we felt like we accommodated that well. We felt like we accommodated the movement of the buses well. We also felt like we accommodated the movement and stacking of passenger parent vehicles well too. What we tried to do was match what happens on the site right now. Right now, there's enough room for about a 10 or 11 car queue on the site right now, and then the rest of the cars queue out on Marlborough Road. And we were trying to match that. We were trying to match that situation, and we think we were able to accommodate that here too. We also were able to accommodate a total of 134 parking spaces at SD. So some of the feedback we got at that programming review. The buses are fine. The quantity of buses are fine, but we wanted to see if there was a better way to take one more look at it and see if there was a better or at least different way to stack the buses on site that reduced the amount of pavement and, more importantly, reduce that pavement width in front of the building where the bus is stacked right now. Because we had a situation where there's an access drive, about a 20-foot access drive, and then we had the concrete area where the buses would stack diagonally, and then we had to accommodate space for them to be able to turn and leave, because of course, as everyone knows, buses aren't allowed to go in reverse on the school property. So we had a pretty wide swath of pavement there, and we were asked to see if there was a way that we could reduce that pavement width. That was one of the items. The other item was parking. It was identified to us that the school would need a minimum of 140 parking spaces. And we tried to also incorporate a few more visiting spaces. So we were asked to see if we could bump that parking up a little bit. So those are the things that we went back to the studio and looked at. Can we find a different way to stack the buses that reduces?
Mike, can I stop you for a minute? I'm sorry. Can Heather's iPhone please mute? I'm sorry. We're getting a lot of background noise. Thank you.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you. So like I said, so we came back to the studio and looked at two really essential things. Can we get the buses stacked in here in a way that, and we get some really good suggestions actually from everybody at that meeting, especially Lori, of how different ways that we might look at accommodating the buses that the school would be okay with. And then can we also see if there's a way that we can fit more parking spaces onto the site and while maintaining the car pickup queue. So Bill, if you can go to the next slide, please. So we went back and looked at it, and we made some small tweaks. We looked at a bunch of different iterations. This is the sort of one that we've landed on right now. So based on feedback from Laurie and Justin, we looked at ways that we could possibly parallel park all of the buses and try to get them all onto the site. So we looked at a bunch of different ways. Where we landed here allows us to accommodate all 18 buses, and it also allows us to eliminate a lot of the pavement width at the front of the building. That, while it still looks wide, that actually accommodates all the buses, but it takes about 25 or 30 feet of the width of the pavement at the front of the building away, and it also creates more lively pedestrian space. And then over to the west of the building, by parallel parking the buses and aligning them along the curb. That allowed us to get more buses down on that end and more buses away from the front again, so that we could reduce some of the pavement width. So that resulted, those small gestures and changes to the circulation pattern allowed us to sort of reorganize some of the site elements in a way that it allowed us better alignments. It allowed us to maintain the number of car pickup queue and actually add another car. So we went from 10 to 11 in the car pickup queue. We still have the 18 buses, as I mentioned. They're just stacked in a different way. What it also allowed us to do was shift the parking fields around a little bit. And you can see what we were able to do is get the car parking space count up from about 134 all the way up to about 150 now. So we feel pretty confident that that accommodates the request for the amount of parking spaces. Just all those little shifts too, also, sort of as a bonus, sort of allowed us to shift the parking a little further away from the building. So in the previous slide, I don't know if can you go back for a minute, Bill? Can you point to the space, Bill, between the car pickup queue and the building? You can see there's just a little sliver of open space through there. The green space, which is white here, in between the building and the sidewalk, along the north side of the building, Bill. Yeah, right through there. Yeah, you can see that little sliver through there. There wasn't a lot. The entrance drive was kind of really uptight, close against the building. But between the building program changes and these program changes, if you can go to the next slide again, please, Bill. You see that white space, which would be green space, has greatly expanded, right? So there's a lot more breathing area between the building and the roadway now. It also allowed us to align the emergency vehicle access from the paved entrance drive over to the front area of the classroom wing. Yeah, there you go. That allowed us to really clean up that alignment so that emergency vehicles, if they ever have to go onto that grass paved area, it's a nice straight line now cutting right across through there. All the rest of the circulation stayed exactly the same. The way the cars enter and exit the site, the way the buses enter and exit the site, all that stuff has stayed the same. But based on the feedback and based on these little tweaks we have, we feel like we've really moved the site design program forward quite a bit, and it's allowed us to realize some unintended nice little bonuses too. So that's where we are with this. We're still working like the really important areas of outdoor student spaces, outdoor learning, connections to the forest, connections of the spaces, the outdoor learning spaces to each other. Those are all still very much a work in progress. We're moving along with them, but I wanted to make sure that everybody understood these what we think are really valuable updates and changes to the way cars and buses move through the space.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. I think we all know that. Go back to that slide if you would. I think we've got some questions and comments on this. When traffic flow works well, nobody thanks us, but when it doesn't work well, nobody ceases to complain. I think a number of us have some questions and comments. Chris, first, please.
Thank you, Michael. I take it you got input from the bus drivers?
Russ Hughes was there, and we got input. So we had gotten input about how the buses work, everything back in the original programming. So we had cut sheets of all the type of buses that are used here, their dimensional criteria, and then we run all that stuff in a program called AutoTurn to make sure that everything worked. One of the nice things about stacking these parallel now, Chris, is that the fleet is, the bus fleet is going to change. It's going to, as we move on, right? So we talked about this a little bit in that meeting. Like, is there going to be a conversion to electric vehicles, to electric buses in the future, right? So those electric buses may have a different size, they may have a different wheelbase length, and they may have a different turn radius. So when we were doing the design with the diagonal spaces, we had added some buffer in for the turn radius for the buses to, for the future. Parallel parking like this sort of future proofs us in a way, because we don't have to worry about the wheelbase or the turning radius of any new bus fleet in the future because the fact that they're parallel parked. The width of a bus is always going to stay about the same, right? I don't think they're going to get wider and fatter. And then the length doesn't really matter because we've actually built plenty of buffer in for the length, and I don't think they're going to get much longer either. It was the wheel turning radius that we were the most concerned about. And parallel parking them instead of putting them on an angle and relying on being able to, turn as hard a left as you can and make that radius turn out. We've sort of eliminated that issue. Does that answer your question? Did I misunderstand your question? Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
Dawn, please.
Yes, hi, Mike. I just had a quick question about the parking and direction of folks getting out. That lot with the 62, is that like employee or something? Is that where they go? It looks like when they come out, they have to go right and then exit from the north. It looks like that's a one-way coming in before you get to the car queue. I'm just picturing people trying to get out of that lot, 62 cars, and only one way in, one way out, and the only way out is to then pass by the car queue and go through the other lot. So just something to think about. That looks like a jam waiting to happen.
One of the things we're looking at right now, so that is a one-way entrance in right now. That's I'm calling that the main entrance, right? Because that kind of leads you to the front door. We made that width of that drive is 20 feet right now, and that was in an effort to keep everything one way and move the circulation through. It was also in an effort to keep pavement reduced. We're looking at the possibility of changing the width of that drive to 24. One, to accommodate actually some of the two-way movement through the other lot, that the 88 space lot, to be able to accommodate some of the movement through there, but also to be able to make sure that we've got enough width and space. And we'll talk about this with fire this afternoon, to make sure that there's enough room to get an emergency vehicle through there in the case that there's an emergency and there are cars stacked there. So if that changes to 24 feet, then there might be an opportunity to on at least a limited basis, make that drive two-way to accommodate that 62 car space a little easier. We'll keep looking at it. Again, it's a work in progress, as you know, right? So.
Right, and you're gonna need clear signage, because I could be wrong, but the majority of people are coming from the east, coming up Old Marlboro.
Yep.
And to pass by two ways to get into the parking lot to then get to the main entry may be confusing for folks that don't know the everyday circulation.
Right.
So just something to think about. Like, I know when I go to the existing site, I'm coming from the top of the screen, right? So people need to then pass two entryways before they can make that turn. So just something to think about as you're looking at signage and communicating to folks.
Everything's clockwise.
Yeah.
Or,
I mean, it's good. It's for good reason. You're trying to get the kids. Yeah, you're trying to get the kids out the right side of the cars and buses. I get all of that. So just from a visitor standpoint, it may be confusing. They may try to make two of those turns before they realize that, oh, I actually can't go that way. It's one way out.
So we're right now, we're planning a monumental sign. And when I say monumental, I don't mean, like Hilltop up in Saugus. I mean a monumental sign, at the entrance, so that it demarcates that. It's not too dissimilar, I hope, from what it is now. Right now, as you're coming from the east, you pass one exit drive before you get to the entrance drive. Now
it's confusing now. As someone who doesn't have a kid in that school and I go to the fields there, it took me a few visits before I understood.
I went in the exit the first time I was there too. I'm not going to lie, but we'll make sure that we handle that with signage. There'll absolutely be like do not enter signs at those exit, and then we'll of course have the monumental sign at the entrance. The other issue that we'll look at is I want to make sure that people coming from the west don't also take that very first drive, access drive into the site, because that leads you to the loading dock. I want to make sure that they don't accidentally use that either. So we'll handle all of that with signage.
Can I follow up with a question? I know Russ has one, but related to those first 5 buses, what are all the, I assume, transformers, generators, all the squares outside of the loading dock? Like, what's that experience for those kids that are getting dropped off?
Yeah, So that,
You know, closer to Old Marlboro where those first 5 buses are, I see that there's a safe, you know, passage, but
right.
yeah, that is some sort of screening situation.
Yeah, so
So
that,
there'll be, yeah, I'm sorry, there'll be a screen there. So that, we didn't get a chance to reorganize. Oh, there's a lot of stuff back there, right? There's the transformer, the generator, battery backups. There's a lot of stuff going on back there. All the PV stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on back there. We're gonna rearrange that and pull that. You can see like the sort of a corner of that wall that wall that we're developing to hide the stuff. It kind of comes all the way out to the sidewalk right now. That whole area is going to get redesigned and the program stuff moved around so that it gets pulled away from the sidewalk. But there is a wall and then the green space in between the sidewalk and the wall will be planted, and also the grading will be manipulated to sort of, you know, create some contour through there. So that should be well hidden from the student experience as they walk along the sidewalk, as they come and go from the buses.
And just
and from
one
the
more
road.
thing, Mike, building up on the organic concept I said earlier about the entry lobby. Maybe there's with 8 buses and 40 kids, you could do the math on that. Maybe there's a way to open up that sidewalk more organically than orthogonally to, you know, as you're collecting these 8 buses of kids, maybe it gets a little bit wider and is a little more organic in how you experience the front of the building and wrap around and meet up with those, you know, 11 cars worth of kids being dropped off as well.
Yeah, you're talking about that sort of nexus right at the corner in the intersection
Yeah.
of it, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't shown anything there. We haven't sort of played that out yet because we haven't had a chance to run the bus turning that auto turn program yet. So once I do that, and we want to, of course, get buy-in from everyone before we did that. Once we have that, then I think that whole sort of intersection there is going to be reimagined to make sure that it's as much of a pedestrian experience as possible.
All right, good, thank you. We're going to be looking at this slide again clearly as you refine it. Russ, please.
Good morning, Mike. Mike, whenever I look at these layouts, I'm thinking snow plowing. So I have a question where buses 9 through 18 regarding the sidewalk. Is that a continuous sidewalk to the main entrance?
Yes, it's continuous, and right now we're looking at it for ease of maintenance and to make sure that we can accommodate stormwater management. We're looking at it as a flush condition.
I'm just, you know, to plow the area for the buses 14 through 18.
Yep.
You know, where you're going to put the snow.
Yeah. So I think there's some opportunity to put, and we're going to create a snow storage plan. Once we think we have buy-in in this, we'll create a snow storage plan, and we'll work with you, Russ, of course, to do that. But we always create a snow storage plan. My initial thoughts, because we were actually thinking about this as we were doing it, my initial thoughts is sort of the side where 9 through 13 are. That snow can all get pushed north into that space between the bus area and Old Marlboro Road, and then 14 through 18. We'll have to figure out a way to, if we can possibly push that over into the same space, or if that has to come maybe the other way and get pushed over towards into that space between the bus and walkway area and the emergency access drive. But we'll certainly work that out for you. There will be some vertical elements through there, right? I think we have to have some vertical elements through there, the bollards, some lighting. Those will be through there. We've also got to anticipate the canopies. If there's still going to be a canopy over at least part of this area, we'll have to take into account the location of the columns for the canopies too. So it's still sort of a work in progress because we haven't added that layer of the PV array canopy yet to this too. So we got to think about that as well.
Because that gray area in front of the education wing, that's like a emergency egress or for the fire department or?
Yeah, that's correct. That's that grass pave area. We didn't want to pave it. So we're proposing the grass pavers through there. And then, so that would all be a flush condition so that emergency vehicles would just be able to come right across through there and access the north side of the education wing.
'cause we'd probably have to plow that too, so that means we gotta hop over the curb and
Yep.
that can do a lot of damage to the plow, granite curbing and stuff, as you know.
Yep. Yep.
So,
So
all right.
we're trying to grade, we're looking right now at trying to figure out a way to grade that area so that it's all a flush condition, so we don't have to have any multiple curb. To be able to avoid just exactly what you're talking about in terms of maintenance and also in terms of emergency vehicles having to travel through there.
Okay, thank you.
Peter, please.
I'm just trying to understand where buses 9 through 13 park. And that brown line, is that a raised area or is that just a marked walkway?
It's marked as walkway. It would be a flush condition, Peter. It would be a flush condition because that helps us. That helps us get kids on. We try to avoid. We try to avoid curbing at bus drop off and pickup areas. We always try to create a flush condition with bollards in between the pedestrian area and the buses. It just makes it a lot simpler condition, A, to grade, B, to maintain, and C, it's easier for the kids. We find it's easier for the kids to get on and off the buses without having to worry about a 6-inch curb reveal there. So that's all going to be a flush condition. And we've got a couple thoughts, so some of this goes back to how this area is going to be programmed, but we have some thoughts that we can develop and share with everybody in terms of, especially at afternoon pickup, which is the most critical element, how the kids would go out to those buses and how the buses would release. We've got some examples of ways to do that with this sort of double stacked line that we can review in further detail.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Help me, Mike, understand how these buses will arrive and stack up in the afternoon. These are all dedicated routes. So if I'm bus 16, I've got a 16 route every day. If I'm the last to arrive in that stack, how do I tuck my vehicle in there?
Yeah, so the buses are going to have to, I think what we've seen in other communities is that the buses arrive when the buses arrive. There's no way to
Right.
tell a
Exactly.
bus when to arrive. So it's going to be, the buses are clearly numbered, right? So this is an operational issue. I see it at some other communities. And I also see it at the community where my son goes to school, where they stack very similar to this. They have 14 buses. They stack very similar to this. And the buses are in 2 locations like this. And the staff will, it's in my community, the staff knows where the buses are parked every day, and then they release the students per bus like that, and that's how they do it. So that's one way to do it. It's an operational issue, though. I think that's something that we'd have to have a discussion with the school.
Yeah, right now, if 16 was the last to arrive, it has to reverse and do a traditional parallel park to get in there, which is not something you're going to permit, right?
Yeah, well, so the numbers on here are just really for me to show you guys how many buses we fit on the site, right? If the last bus comes in, the last bus is going to have to park where I've identified bus 1, for instance, in this plan, right? The first bus that arrives on the site in the afternoon ostensibly would pull all the way up to where the 18 is, and so forth and so on. As they arrive, they'll stack into these things, and then wherever that bus number is, faculty or staff would need to know where that bus is to be able to release the kids to that bus.
That's going to be managed chaos every day if a youngster's bus is in a different spot every single day. And
Isn't that how it happens now? Isn't that?
Yeah,
I feel like my kids at Alcott.
Yeah, but they're not distributed like this across a campus, is my point. Now, I don't want to get into the details, but we've got them in 4 different locations. So we're going to need a number of staff and a number of radios to get kids to buses, just as a practical matter.
Yep, Justin was part of this. He was comfortable.
Okay.
There weren't great, the other options, reduced parking, which is a problem. So
I
trade off. I think we can choreograph it so it's
good,
doable. The buses arrive in a very predictable pattern. So I don't expect it would change up all that much, except for a rare breakdown or traffic event or something,
Great.
but
Okay.
it should be something we can set up in the beginning of the year and work through.
I would
Good.
also offer to Court's concern, there's the 8 to the left of the screen and the 10 to the right of the screen, or whatever the number is. Those 8 could always go into that 8, regardless of which area they come. So the kids that take those routes would always go to that area. And their bus one day might be an 8, it might be a 6 the next day, but they won't have to then interchange between the 2 zones because
That's a
they have
good
separate
point.
entrances.
So at least you know what exit to use consistently.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, good.
Yep.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? I really appreciate how we've taken some asphalt out of this for buses and dedicated it toward parking, Mike.
Just really quickly, the impervious area, which has been on all of our minds for a couple years now. We feel like these changes at least are a net balance of not changing the amount of impervious area. We were at about 15.4%. We've had several conversations with the town about the impervious area, with planning, with conservation, everybody about this. So I feel very confident in these designs, at a minimum, maintain where we are with impervious, which is, like I said, about 15.4%. And they may even reduce it slightly. We're still looking at other ways to reduce that number down. Now, we found out that 15% is not a magic number. We don't have to be 14.9%. We can be a little over 15%, and we can get a waiver for that, especially since we're doing a lot of things to help with with groundwater. So I feel like we're in really good shape. We're not going to be going to them asking them for a waiver because we're at 18% or 20%. We're at 15.5%. So I feel like we're in really good shape with that as well.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, no, Mike, we appreciate how committed you've been to working within those numbers and supporting the town's bylaws.
Let me go back to Lorraine. Lorraine, you don't need any specific recommendations from this body at this time, if I'm correct.
No, we do not. I think the conversation and the questions everyone has raised are really good for us. I think that helps us. The purpose of this is to sort of flush those out, as you said, Court. And so moving into the building committee meeting, we'll be more prepared for those answers to make sure that we can address those. So I think these are a great prep for us. And I hate to say it that way, but it really is good for us to get your feedback early in advance of the building committee meeting so we can continue to move down the path of completing design development.
Good, excellent, thank you.
I do have one update I would like to make, Court.
Yes, please.
Because Charlie had mentioned at the beginning, and I didn't want to interrupt you, about the email from Matt Root.
Ah, yes, okay.
So on March, I just wanted to pull up my calendar. On March 24th, I met with Matt, Dawn, Pat, and Laurie, and Ian. And we went through all the items in that email, those 8 to 9 items that Matt had submitted. Some of those items are not relevant because some of them continued to talk about passive house, etc. And we did make a commitment to Matt that I would set up a sustainable subcommittee meeting, but we needed to advance both the plan and the MEP designs in order to have something tangible to talk about. So that setting up that meeting is on my docket. Internally, we're at the next building committee meeting. Our MEP team is going to give an overview of the advancement of the design, and then we'll have a follow-up meeting after that with the sustainable subcommittee. But I just wanted to make you aware that that email wasn't out there and not addressed. We actually did set up a meeting with Matt and went item by item with them.
Perfect. And then you and Matt will follow up when you're ready for that. Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other comments from the committee or anybody else on the design team?
I'm going to have to hop off, so why don't I just say goodbye now?
All right, Lori, thank you very much. Have a good
Thanks,
holiday and good weekend. Thank you very much.
You too, everyone. Bye.
So we've got another minute or two here, whatever's necessary. We are going to not schedule the next meeting. I think we'll get the full building committee meeting under our belts, and then Lorraine and Ian and I can consult as to when design subcommittee should reconvene, if that's okay with everybody. And with that, I'll turn to public comments. We have a few people on the call today. If anybody, let's see. I think we've lost a couple of people who were with us, but does anybody have public comments at this point in time? I'm seeing none. So I think this has been a very informative, productive meeting. I want to thank everybody on the call today for all the preparation required to pull this off today. Thank you. I think it holds us in good stead for meeting in 2 weeks. Lorraine, we hope you have a very safe trip. We're envious. So have a safe trip, enjoy it. And
Thank you all and happy Easter.
yes, I will look for a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
All right, Mr. Popov moves to adjourn. Is there a second, please?
Second.
And a second from Mr. Fishalis. We'll do a roll call on that motion. Court Booth, yes. Peter Fishalis,
Yes.
Don Gariello,
Yes.
Russ Hughes.
Yes.
Lori has left us for other activities in the schools. Chris Popov
Yes.
and Charlie Parker left about 20 minutes ago, I believe, also. So meeting is adjourned, and have a great day, all. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
You.
Thank you.
Thank you.